Hello, and welcome to the podcast, GB Business Digest. Today's episode is about Mexican remittances in July 2024. Let's get started.
All right, deep divers, imagine this. You walk into a room and everyone's talking about the latest remittance trends in Mexico, right? You need that quick download and you need to get up to speed. Well, think of this as your crash course. We are diving into Banxico's recent report on remittances from July 2024.
And I gotta say, these aren't just numbers on a page. It's a fascinating look at how this really powerful economic force impacts Mexico.
Powerful economic force. Okay. Let's talk numbers then. What's the top line figure? How much money came into Mexico during July via remittances?
So Mexico received $5.614 billion in remittances, July 2024. Now that seems like a lot, which it is, but it's actually a tiny dip, about 1% less than July of last year.
A decrease, really. Interesting. I figured with, everything going on, that figure would be going up.
Yeah, you'd think so, but it's not always that simple. And we'll get into why that might be later. But there's something else in this report that really jumped out at me. Remittances going the other way. Out of Mexico.
Out of Mexico, you mean like people sending money from Mexico to other countries?
Exactly. It doesn't always get talked about, but it's definitely something to watch. July 2024 saw outward remittances jump by a considerable amount, like 21.7%, reaching $110 million.
Whoa, 21.7%. That's a pretty big jump. Before we get into why that is, maybe give us a quick refresher. I know we talked about remittances a lot here, but just for anyone who needs it, what are we even talking about here, especially in the context of Mexico?
Yeah, so remittances, at their core, we're talking about money transfers. Usually, someone working abroad sending money back to their home country. For Mexico, these remittances are a lifeline. We're talking about money that puts food on the table, pays for housing, education, healthcare. It's vital for the Mexican economy.
And how big are we talking? Like, compared to other sources of income from Mexico, where do remittances fall?
They are massive. To put it in perspective, they often beat out what Mexico makes from some of its big industries, even rivaling oil exports some years. So yeah, a huge chunk of their income.
Okay, so we've got these two things happening at the same time. Remittances coming into Mexico, which are still a huge deal, but maybe are plateauing a bit. And then we've got this surge in remittances going OUT of Mexico, like a financial tug of war, and I'm really curious to see where it's going to go.
Let's unpack it, shall we?
Okay, so digging back into this Banxico report, and one thing that really caught my eye was just how much of this money coming into Mexico, these remittances, are arriving digitally. Like it says 99% is electronic transfers now, is that right?
Yeah, 99% is electronic. It's a big shift. I mean, digital financial services are everywhere now, even more so for Mexicans abroad.
So no more like envelopes stuffed with cash waiting in line at Western Union.
It's definitely changing. Online banking, mobile payment apps, all that. Technology's making it way easier to send and receive money across borders.
And what kind of impact is that having?
Yeah.
I mean, besides being more convenient, right?
Right. It's bigger than just convenience. This is about access. Think about it. Before, if you were sending money back home, especially to more rural parts of Mexico, traditional methods, they had huge fees, and it was just difficult. Digital levels the playing field.
Makes it more fair, more people can participate.
Exactly. Financial inclusion, that's what we're talking about. It can really boost economic activity, help stabilize things, and most importantly, families who rely on these remittances, they just have a better shot.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's a single-month snapshot, July 2024, but let's pull back and look at the bigger picture here. Banxico's report also shows us the total for January to July 2024, $36.94 billion in remittances. That's actually a 2.9% increase over the same period last year. So why the growth? Especially if, like we saw, July itself was down a bit.
Good question. Okay, so a few things to consider. First, you got to look at the U.S. economy. It's the biggest source of these remittances, right? When the U.S. is doing well, more jobs, better wages for a lot of Mexican migrants, meaning they've got more to send back home.
So a strong U.S. economy generally means more remittances flowing into Mexico.
Most of the time, yeah. But it's not that straightforward. We've also got to factor in those exchange rates, how the Mexican peso stacks up against the U.S. dollar. If the peso is strong, those remittances, they go further. Families can buy more back in Mexico.
Right, because it's not just how many dollars or pesos are sent, it's what that money can actually do, the buying power.
Exactly. And then there's the stuff you can't always predict. You see spikes in remittances sometimes because of things like natural disasters. A hurricane hits, family back home needs help, so people send more money. Or even just things happening in families, emergencies, stuff like that.
A good reminder that behind all these billions of dollars, it's real people, real families, real connections that drive these flows of money. And speaking of connections, I want to circle back to that other trend, the remittances going the other direction, out of Mexico, so outward remittances. In the first 7 months of 2024, up 31.7%, totaling $796 million. That's a big jump. What's the story there? Why are people in Mexico sending so much money out?
It's a really interesting trend, and it might point to some bigger changes happening, with Mexico's economy and just society in general. One thing that often gets overlooked is this idea of, well, you could call it reverse remittances.
Reverse remittances.
Yeah. So we're used to thinking about Mexicans abroad sending money back home, right? Supporting family. But now we're seeing more Mexican residents sending money to their families who have migrated to, well, other countries. It's like the flow of migration is getting more complex, more two-way.
So it's less about a one-way street of money from, say, the U.S. to Mexico, and more about families, wherever they are, supporting each other across borders.
Exactly. And that's a powerful thing, right? Those family ties, that obligation to help each other out no matter where life takes you. But it's not always just family support either. This trend, it could also mean more people are leaving Mexico, emigrating to other parts of the world.
So more people choosing to make a life somewhere else, and maybe they're sending money back for all sorts of reasons.
Right. Could be helping family back in Mexico, maybe investing in property there, starting businesses, or just managing their finances across borders. It's a sign of how things are changing, maybe economically, maybe people are looking for different opportunities, or maybe there's just a growing community of Mexicans around the world and those connections remain strong.
It's amazing how much these remittances, both coming in and going out, tell us about what's happening in Mexico. Like, we talk about the money, but really it's about people. About families and how connected the world is becoming.
That's right. Data is fascinating like that. It's never just numbers, it's human stories. It's about the choices people make, the forces that shape those choices. It's all connected.
Well said. All right, deep divers, let's take a second to recap what we've learned today about remittances in Mexico. It's clear that these flows of money are still a huge deal for the Mexican economy, even if we might be seeing them plateau a bit. And on the flip side, those outward remittances, that's definitely something we're going to keep our eye on. Oh, and we can't forget about how technology is changing the game. Digital transfers, making things easier, more accessible for everyone. But here's a final thought for you all to chew on. These changes we're seeing in remittances, what if it's a sign of something even bigger happening in Mexico? Maybe how the economy's changing, how people are thinking about where they live and work, or maybe something we haven't even thought of yet. Something to think about.
Always remember, look past those numbers and see the people, the families, the individual stories. That's where the real insights are.
Thank you for listening to this episode of GBE Business Digest. If you found this information useful and would like to stay updated with the latest business insights, make sure to subscribe, activate the bell, and visit the Carlos Bastida website to explore his portfolio of services. The link is in the description. Let's work together to take your business to the next level.